What if the reason you can't sleep isn't in your body, but in a question you've never let yourself ask? Not what's wrong with me, but something older, quieter. What if the mind that won't stop spinning at 2 in the morning is not broken, but simply untrained? What if peace was never something you had to find, because it was never lost, only buried under so much noise that you forgot it was there? There's a way of thinking about the mind that Buddhist teachers have quietly passed down for centuries, not as religion, not as ritual, but as a method. A way of working with the restless, racing, worrying mind until it settles the way water settles when you stop stirring it. Tonight, we're going to walk through that method slowly, not to give you information to remember, to give you something to feel, something that might, if you let it, carry you gently into sleep. Most people think their sleeplessness is a thinking problem, so they try to think their way out of it. They make lists, they plan tomorrow, they replay today. They tell themselves, just relax, as if relaxation is a switch, as if the mind will obey a command shouted at it in the dark. But the mind doesn't work that way. The harder you try to force it still, the more it resists, like a river pushed against its own current. This is the quiet suffering nobody talks about, lying in the dark, exhausted, and still somehow wide awake inside your own head. Not because you're weak, not because something is wrong with you, but because no one ever taught you what to do with a mind that won't stop moving. That's what this is for. The mind is not the enemy. You have probably spent years believing that your thoughts are the problem, that if you could just stop thinking, you would finally rest, that somewhere out there, other people have discovered some trick to switch off their minds at night, and you're the only one still lying there, with the lights out and the noise still going. But no one has ever stopped thinking by trying to stop thinking. That's like trying to calm a lake by slapping the water. The slapping only makes more waves, and then you get frustrated at the waves, so you slap harder, and now the whole lake is churning, and you wonder why you can't just be still. This is the trap almost everyone falls into without realizing it. You treat your own mind like it's an opponent, like it's some separate thing that has turned against you, keeping you up on purpose, refusing to cooperate. You start talking to it the way you'd talk to a disobedient animal. Stop it. Just relax. Why can't you just be quiet? But have you ever noticed that this only makes the noise louder? That the more urgently you demand silence, the more your mind seems to rebel against you? That's because you're fighting the wrong battle. You are not two things, a mind that misbehaves and a you that has to control it. There's just one thing happening, and the moment you turn it into a war, you've already lost, because a war needs two sides, and there is only one house here, and you are trying to fight your own walls. The old teachers understood something different. They said the mind is like a house, with the windows always open. Wind comes in, leaves come in, dust comes in. Of course it does. The windows are open. That's simply what a house with open windows does. You don't blame the wind for blowing. You don't stand at the window shouting at the leaves to stop landing on your floor. You don't take it personally when dust settles on the table. You just quietly accept. This is what happens when the windows are open. And the windows are always open, because that's what a mind is. Your thoughts at night are not attacking you. They are wind through an open window. The plans, the worries, the replays of old conversations, the sudden memory of something embarrassing from years ago that arrives uninvited at 1 a.m. None of it is happening because your mind hates you. It's happening because that's simply the nature of a mind. It moves, it reaches, it replays. It's not broken any more than wind is broken for blowing, or rain is broken for falling. The moment you stop treating your thoughts as an enemy to defeat, something in the chest loosens. Not all at once. This isn't a switch either, but enough to breathe differently, enough to stop gripping so tightly. Try this the next time your mind is loud at night. Instead of saying stop, try saying, almost gently, Oh, there it is again. Not with irritation, not with despair, just noticing, the way you'd notice rain starting outside a window while you sit warm and dry inside. The rain doesn't need you to argue with it. It's just rain. Let it be rain. This shift seems small, almost too small to matter. But it changes everything about how a sleepless night feels. Because when you fight your thoughts, you give them weight. A thought you resist becomes a thought that grows louder, the way a small itch becomes unbearable the second you decide you must not scratch it. But a thought you simply allow, the way you allow wind to pass through an open window, tends to move through and out again on its own, because that is what it was always going to do anyway. Thoughts arise and thoughts pass. That has always been true, whether you fight them or not. The only thing that changes is how much it costs you. Think about the last time you tried to force yourself to sleep. You told yourself, over and over, I need to sleep, I need to sleep. And each time you said it, you became more awake, more aware of the ticking clock, more aware of your own heartbeat, more aware of the exact number of hours left before your alarm. That effort, that trying, is itself a kind of noise. It's the mind treating itself as a problem to solve, a machine to fix, an enemy to subdue. And the enemy never rests when it knows it's being hunted. But there is another way to sit with the mind at night, not as a soldier standing guard, but as someone sitting quietly by an open window, letting whatever comes through simply pass. Not fighting the wind, not chasing the leaves, not sweeping frantically at 3 a.m, trying to make the floor spotless before you're allowed to rest. Just sitting, just watching, just letting the house be a house with open windows, the way it always was, the way it was always going to be. This is the first shift the old teaching asks of you, not to silence the mind, because that was never possible, and every failed attempt at silence only convinced you that you were somehow uniquely broken for not achieving it. The shift is simpler and, in a strange way, kinder. Stop treating the mind as something to defeat. It was never your enemy. It was only ever a house with the windows open, doing exactly what houses with open windows do. And once you stop blaming the wind, you might notice, for the first time in a long while, that you can finally just sit still inside your own home. Empty space is not missing something. We live in a world that hates emptiness. Silence feels like a hole that needs filling, with a podcast, a scroll, a plan, a worry, anything at all rather than nothing. The second a room goes quiet, most people reach for their phone. The second a conversation pauses too long, someone rushes to fill it, because silence has started to feel like failure, like something has gone wrong, like the moment is broken and needs fixing immediately. This habit doesn't stay in your daytime life. It follows you into bed. The moment your head hits the pillow and the noise of the day finally stops, something in you panics at the quiet. So your mind rushes in to fill the space, with tomorrow's schedule, with today's mistakes, with a conversation from 3 years ago that suddenly resurfaces for no reason at all. The silence didn't feel safe, so the mind filled it the only way it knew how. But in this teaching, empty space is not absence. It's not a gap where something should be, waiting to be filled. It's the room itself. It's what allows anything to exist at all. Without empty space, nothing could ever happen, because there would be no room for it to happen in. Think of a cup. The reason a cup is useful is not the clay walls. It's the empty space inside them. If the cup was solid all the way through, it couldn't hold water. It would just be a heavy, useless lump of clay. Technically, a cup in shape, but incapable of doing the one thing a cup is for. The emptiness inside isn't a flaw in the cup's design, it is the design. Without it, there is no cup at all, only clay pretending to be one. Think of a room. What makes a room usable isn't the 4 walls, it's the open space between them. A room built entirely of solid material, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, would not be a room. it would be a block. The emptiness is what makes it livable. And a house isn't a house because of its bricks. It's a house because of the space the bricks make possible. Your mind is the same. The gaps between your thoughts, the tiny, almost invisible pauses, those aren't empty because something is wrong. Those gaps are where the mind actually rests. Most people never notice them because they're too busy grabbing at the next thought before the last one has even finished. The way someone might frantically flip through television channels, never once landing on a single picture long enough to actually see it. Here's something worth sitting with. Between one thought ending and the next one beginning, there is a small window, usually less than a second, where nothing at all is happening. No worry, no plan, no memory, just a soft, wide-open nothing. That gap has always been there. It was there yesterday. It was there when you were a child. It will be there tonight. You've simply never been taught to notice it, because everything around you insists that gaps are wasted time, that silence is a problem, that any pause must be filled immediately with something, anything, rather than nothing. But that gap is not wasted. That gap is the floor the whole house stands on. Every thought you've ever had arose out of that space and eventually dissolved back into it, the way a wave rises from the ocean and eventually settles back into it, never actually separate from the water it came from. The wave doesn't need to be destroyed for the ocean to be calm. It just needs to be allowed to return to what it already was. Tonight, try letting one thought end. Just one. Don't reach for the next one immediately, the way you usually do, almost automatically, the way your hand reaches for your phone without you even deciding to pick it up. Let the silence after that one thought stay a little longer than usual. It will feel strange at first, maybe even uncomfortable, like standing in a doorway too long without walking through it. That discomfort is only unfamiliarity, not danger. Nothing bad happens in that space. Nothing has ever happened in that space, except quiet. That's the beginning of everything this teaching is pointing toward. Not adding a technique, not building a new habit, not forcing yourself into some deeper state of calm through effort. Just noticing what was already there, underneath all the noise you've spent your whole life mistaking for the only thing that exists. The emptiness was never missing something. It was holding everything up the entire time. The way the space inside the cup was always what made it capable of holding water, long before you ever noticed it was there. The story you keep telling yourself. There is a version of you that exists only in your head at night, a version constantly narrating, explaining, defending, worrying. I should have said that differently. What if tomorrow goes wrong? Why do I always do this? This voice arrives the moment the room goes quiet, as if it had been waiting all day for its turn to speak, patiently standing just behind the noise of your daily life, until finally, in the stillness of night, there was nothing left to compete with it. This voice feels like it's protecting you. It sounds so reasonable, so concerned, so responsible. It tells you it's just trying to help you prepare, to make sure you don't make the same mistake twice, to keep you safe from whatever might go wrong tomorrow. It even sounds a little like love, in its own strange, exhausting way, like a part of you that cares too much to let you rest. But notice, has this voice ever once actually solved anything at 2 a.m.? Has replaying an old conversation for the 100th time ever changed how it ended? Has worrying about tomorrow's meeting, turning it over and over in your mind at midnight, ever once made tomorrow's meeting go better? Or does it only ever make tonight go worse, while tomorrow arrives completely unaffected by all those hours you spent awake, bracing for it? This is worth sitting with honestly, without judgment, just as an observation. The mind at night rarely produces anything useful. It doesn't solve, it doesn't decide, it doesn't create real clarity. It just loops, the same worry, dressed in slightly different clothes, walking past you again and again, as if repetition itself might eventually produce an answer. It never does. Morning comes, and the answer, if there was one, was never found at 3 a.m. It was found later, in daylight, with a clear head, often in 5 minutes, after an entire sleepless night failed to produce it in 5 hours. The old teaching doesn't ask you to argue with this voice, and this is important, because arguing is exactly what keeps it alive. If you try to reason with a worry, no, that won't happen, no, I did fine, no, stop saying that. You are still standing in the ring with it, still taking its claims seriously enough to need a rebuttal. And every rebuttal only proves, in some strange backward way, that the argument mattered enough to respond to. The voice gets stronger the more seriously you treat it, the same way a small fire gets bigger the more air you feed it, even if that air comes in the form of you trying to put it out. Instead, this teaching asks something quieter and, at first, much harder to trust. Simply notice that it is a voice, not a fact, not truth, not a reliable report on reality, just a habit of noise the mind has practiced for years, running on autopilot. The way a familiar song plays in your head, whether or not you wanted to hear it. The moment you see a thought as a thought happening, instead of the truth about my life, it loses its grip slightly, like a knot that loosens the instant you stop pulling on both ends. Try this distinction the next time the voice starts up at night. Instead of thinking, I always mess things up, try noticing, there's the thought again, the one that says, I always mess things up. Notice the difference in how those two sentences feel in your chest. The first one is a verdict. The second one is just weather passing through, a familiar cloud you've seen many times before, one you don't need to chase or fight, only watch. This isn't about convincing yourself the thought is wrong. You don't need to prove anything to it. You simply step back one small pace, far enough to see that this narrating voice is not the whole of you. It's a habit, a pattern, a well-worn groove the mind falls into out of familiarity, not because it's speaking some deeper truth about who you are or what tomorrow holds. Think of it like a radio playing in another room. You can hear it, you know it's there, but you don't have to walk in and argue with the broadcaster. You don't have to prove the weatherman wrong when he says it might rain. You just let the sound exist in the background, without giving it the authority to decide how your night goes. The voice at 2 a.m. deserves the same quiet indifference. Let it play. You don't have to switch it off. You don't have to answer it. You only have to remember that you are not the radio. You are the room the radio happens to be playing in. Spacious, unaffected, still there long after the broadcast ends. Where silence actually lives. People imagine peace as something loud, a burst of clarity, a lightning strike of enlightenment, a moment where the clouds part, and suddenly everything makes sense at once. They picture it as an event, something that arrives with fanfare, something you'd notice the instant it happened, the way you'd notice a sudden flash of light in a dark room. So they wait for that moment. They search for it in books, in retreats, in quiet mornings that never quite deliver the stillness they were hoping for. And when it doesn't come, they assume peace simply isn't available to them, that some people are lucky enough to find it, and they are not one of those people. But real peace is almost embarrassingly quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't interrupt your day with trumpets. It's not a moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's the space just before a sound and just after it ends. It's the pause between one breath leaving and the next one arriving. It's so unremarkable, so free of drama, that most people walk right past it 1,000 times a day without ever noticing it was there. Think about the last time you heard a single bell ring, in a temple, in a video, anywhere. The sound itself lasts only a second or two, but notice what happens right after. There's a lingering quiet, a stillness that seems to hang in the air even after the sound has completely stopped. That stillness isn't empty. It isn't a gap waiting to be filled with the next sound. It's full of something soft and complete, something that doesn't need anything added to it. That's the same silence this teaching keeps pointing toward, not the absence of sound. The presence of something underneath sound, something that was there before the bell rang and remains there after it fades. You don't need to search far for this. It's already happening, right now, in the tiny gap between reading this sentence and reading the next one. It happened in the half-second between your last breath out and the next breath in. It's been happening your whole life, quietly, without asking for credit, without demanding your attention, patient enough to wait as long as it takes for you to finally notice it. Most people walk straight past it their whole lives, chasing louder and louder things, believing that peace must be something bigger, something more impressive, something that finally silences the noise once and for all. They chase achievements, thinking peace will arrive once they've accomplished enough. They chase relationships, thinking peace will arrive once they're loved enough. They chase distraction, thinking peace will arrive once they're numb enough to stop noticing its absence. And all along, none of it was necessary, because the quiet was always underneath, holding everything up, like the floor beneath a noisy room. Imagine a room full of people, talking, laughing, arguing, a party in full swing, chaotic, loud, alive with motion. Now notice, none of that noise is possible without the floor beneath it. The floor doesn't need the noise to stop in order to hold everyone up. It's already doing its job, quietly, underneath everything, whether the party is loud or silent, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Your mind is the same. Beneath every worry, every racing thought, every sleepless replay of the day, there is a floor. It was never disturbed by the noise above it. It doesn't need the noise to end in order to exist. It's simply there, the way it's always been there, waiting for you to stop staring only at the party and notice, just once, what's holding it up. This is why chasing peace so often fails to produce it. Chasing implies distance, implies that peace is somewhere else, ahead of you, requiring effort to reach. But if peace is actually the floor beneath the noise, then chasing it is like running around a room, searching for the ground you're already standing on. No amount of running will help you find something that was never lost, never distant, never somewhere else. It only tires you out, convinces you that peace is exhausting, difficult, maybe even impossible for someone like you. Try, instead, something almost absurdly small tonight. Notice one pause, just one. The pause after you exhale, before the next inhale begins. Don't try to make it longer. Don't try to make it feel a certain way. Just notice that it's there, the way you'd notice a familiar street you've walked past 1,000 times without ever really looking at it. That pause has been there your entire life. It was there when you were a child falling asleep without any of the worries you carry now. It's there tonight, exactly the same as it's always been, patient, unchanged, waiting quietly beneath everything you've been chasing so hard to find. That's where silence actually lives, not in some faraway achievement, not in some future version of your life, where everything finally settles down, but right here, in the ordinary, unremarkable gaps you've been stepping over your whole life without noticing. You don't have to build it. You don't have to earn it. You only have to stop long enough to notice it was always there, holding up every loud, chaotic, sleepless night you've ever had, asking nothing from you except a moment of attention, carrying less than you think. There's an old story about a monk crossing a river with a younger traveler. On the far bank, they come across a woman standing at the water's edge, unable to cross because of the current, worried about ruining her clothes or being swept off her feet. Without a word, the monk lifts her onto his back, carries her across the river, sets her down gently on the other side, and continues walking, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Hours later, As they continue their journey, the younger traveler can't hold it in any longer. How could you touch her like that? We're supposed to avoid that kind of contact. It goes against everything we're taught. The monk looks at him, almost puzzled by the question, and replies simply, "I set her down at the river." Why are you still carrying her? That question has stayed alive for centuries because it points at something almost everyone recognizes the instant they hear it. Most of what keeps you awake at night is not the event itself. It's you, still carrying it, hours or years after it actually ended. The argument that happened yesterday, the mistake you made 5 years ago that still visits you sometimes at 2 a.m. as if it just occurred. The version of yourself you wish had done better, said something smarter, reacted more calmly, been braver, been kinder, been different. None of it is happening right now. It ended already. And yet your mind keeps carrying it into a moment where it no longer belongs. The way you might carry a heavy bag through an empty house long after you've already arrived home and had every opportunity to set it down. This is worth noticing honestly. The event itself usually takes minutes. An argument lasts 10 minutes. An embarrassing moment lasts 30 seconds. A mistake happens in an instant. But the carrying, the replaying, the reliving, the turning it over again and again in your mind, that can go on for years, if you let it. The weight was never really in the event. The weight is in how long you keep picking it back up. Think about something specific from your own life. An old argument, perhaps. One that ended long ago, resolved or not, but finished either way. Notice that when you bring it to mind, some part of you tenses slightly, as if it were happening right now, as if the other person were still in the room, as if you still needed to defend yourself or explain yourself all over again. But they're not there. That moment isn't happening. You are, in this instant, completely safe, completely alone, with only your own memory, and yet your body reacts as if the danger were current. That's the weight of carrying something the river already released you from long ago. Tonight, when a memory or worry surfaces, and it will, because that's simply what minds do, try silently saying to yourself, "I can set this down now," not because it doesn't matter, not because it wasn't real, or wasn't difficult, or didn't hurt, but because you are allowed to stop carrying it while you sleep. The event has already ended. The river has already been crossed. The only thing keeping the weight present is your own grip, and grips, unlike rivers, can always be loosened. This isn't about forgetting, and it isn't about pretending something didn't matter. The monk didn't pretend the woman wasn't heavy while he carried her. She was heavy. The current was real. The crossing took real effort. But once he reached the other side, he set her down, because that's what you do when a crossing is finished. He didn't carry her for the rest of the journey out of some misplaced sense of loyalty to the difficulty of that moment. The difficulty was real, and then it was over, and then it was time to walk on, unburdened. Ask yourself, gently, without judgment, what are you still carrying tonight that already reached the other side of the river, hours, days, or years ago? What conversation, what mistake, what moment are you still holding on to long after it stopped needing to be held? You don't have to carry it forever, simply because it was once heavy. You're allowed to set it down at the water's edge and keep walking, lighter, into whatever rest is waiting for you tonight. The practice of noticing without reacting. This is the part most people skip because it sounds too simple to work, and yet it's the entire method, the quiet center around which everything else in this teaching revolves. When a thought comes, you don't push it away. You don't follow it either. You simply notice it, the way you'd notice a car passing on a distant road outside your window. It's there. It's loud for a second, maybe two. Then it's gone, and the road is quiet again, exactly as it was before the car ever passed. This sounds almost too easy to be real. Surely peace requires more effort than simply watching a thought pass by. Surely there must be some technique, some deeper trick, some harder discipline required to finally quiet a restless mind. But notice, every time you've tried the harder way, the way of forcing, controlling, suppressing, arguing, has it ever actually worked? Or has it always, eventually, made the noise louder? The way pressing down harder on a spring only makes it push back with more force the moment you let go. This practice, noticing without reacting, is different from suppression, and the difference matters enormously. Suppression is closing the window and hoping the wind stops blowing outside. It takes enormous effort, it never really works, and eventually the window bursts open again, often with more force than before, because you spent so much energy trying to keep it shut. Noticing is something else entirely. Noticing is standing calmly at the open window, watching the wind move the curtains, without needing it to stop at all. You're not fighting the wind. You're not inviting it in further either. You're simply present with it, unbothered by its presence, the way you might watch rain fall outside, without needing it to stop, before you can feel at ease inside your own home. Try this literally, tonight, the next time a thought arrives uninvited. Don't argue with it. Don't elaborate on it. Don't build a whole story around it, adding details, imagining conversations, rehearsing responses. Just notice, there's a thought. That's it. Nothing more needs to be added. The thought arrived, you noticed it arrived, and now you simply wait. The way you'd wait for a car to finish passing on a quiet road, trusting, because you've seen it happen every single time before, that the sound will fade and the road will return to silence on its own, without your help, without your effort, without your interference. This is different from what most people believe meditation or mindfulness requires. They imagine it means becoming a blank slate, achieving a mind with no thoughts at all, some pristine emptiness that never gets interrupted. But that's not what's being asked here, and chasing that kind of total silence usually creates more frustration than peace. Because thoughts will keep arising. That's simply what a mind does, the way weather keeps happening, regardless of how much you'd prefer permanent sunshine. The goal was never to stop the weather. The goal is to stop needing the weather to be different than it is, in order to feel at ease. Over time, and this happens more gently than you might expect, the mind learns it doesn't have to grab every thought that walks by. Just like a dog that's been trained not to chase every car that drives past, your mind, with enough gentle practice, begins to relax its grip on the compulsion to follow every thought, all the way down whatever spiral it's offering. It learns that watching is enough. It learns that a thought can arrive, be acknowledged and pass, without needing to be solved, argued with, or acted upon in that exact moment. This is not something you master in one night. Some nights, thoughts will still pull you along despite your best efforts, and that's fine. That's not failure. That's simply the practice continuing. The way learning to walk includes falling down many times before the legs remember what to do on their own. The point was never perfection. The point was simply returning, again and again, gently, to noticing, rather than reacting, until eventually, not through force, but through familiarity, the noticing becomes the more natural response, and the reacting becomes the exception rather than the rule. Why trying harder makes it worse? There's a strange paradox here, one that almost everyone has lived through without ever naming it. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you become. Because trying is a form of tension, and tension is the opposite of rest. Trying says, I must control this right now. I must make this happen. I must force my body and mind into stillness through sheer will. But peace has never once responded to force. Not once. In the entire history of anyone lying awake at night. It responds to release, and release cannot be forced. Because the moment you force release, you've already turned it back into effort. Think about how strange this actually is when you look at it closely. Sleep is the one thing in your life that cannot be achieved through effort. You can force yourself to work harder. You can force yourself to run faster study longer, push through exhaustion at your job, but you cannot force yourself to sleep. The trying itself becomes the obstacle. It's like trying to force yourself to forget something. The very act of trying to forget requires you to keep the thing in mind long enough to push it away, which means you never actually forget it at all. You just keep rehearsing it under the label of trying not to think about it. This is why so many people lying awake at night feel a particular kind of exhausted frustration that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. They are tired and yet wide awake, and the very awareness of being tired while awake creates more tension, more urgency, more desperate trying. I have work tomorrow. I need to sleep. Why can't I just sleep? Everyone else can sleep. What's wrong with me? Each of those thoughts adds another small twist to an already tight knot, and the knot doesn't loosen through more pulling. It only loosens when the pulling stops. Imagine holding a small bird in your closed fist. You're not trying to hurt it. You're actually trying to protect it, to keep it safe, to make sure it doesn't fly away and get lost somewhere in the dark. But the tighter you squeeze, thinking you're keeping it safe, the more it panics, the more it struggles against your grip, wings beating frantically against your fingers, heart racing so fast you can feel it through your closed hand. The bird isn't struggling because you're cruel. It's struggling because tight, fearful holding feels like danger to anything alive, even when the intention behind it was gentle. But open your hand, just slightly, just enough, and something remarkable happens. It doesn't fly away in a panic. It doesn't bolt into the darkness the second it senses freedom. It just rests, because it's no longer being crushed, because the fear that was driving its frantic struggle has finally been given room to settle. The openness itself is what allows the stillness. Not more grip, not tighter control, just space. Your mind is the same bird, held every night in the same tightening fist of I must sleep, I must control this, I must force this to happen right now. And every night that grip tightens, the mind struggles harder against it, not because it wants to stay awake, but because tension breeds more tension, the way fear breeds more fear, each one feeding the other, in a loop that only tightens further the more you try to muscle your way out of it. The instruction was never to hold on tighter. It was to open your hand, not throw the bird away, not abandon the desire to rest, but simply loosen the grip enough for something softer to take over. This means practically, tonight, the moment you notice yourself trying too hard to sleep, straining toward it, forcing your eyes shut, commanding your body to relax through gritted teeth, notice that trying, and let it soften, not by adding more effort to relax. That's just the same fist, clenched from a different angle, but by remembering that you don't actually need to do anything at all. Sleep was never something you built through effort. It was always something that arrived on its own, the moment you stopped chasing it hard enough to keep it running away from you. This is perhaps the hardest part of the entire teaching to trust, because everything else in life has taught you the opposite. That effort produces results, that trying harder gets you further, that willpower is the answer to every obstacle. But rest doesn't play by those rules. It never has. And the sooner you stop expecting it to, the sooner your hand can finally open. The piece that was never missing here is the quiet secret underneath all of this. You were never trying to build peace from nothing. You were never starting from zero, trying to manufacture calm out of pure effort, the way you might build a house from an empty plot of land. You were trying to remember something you already had, something that existed in you long before life taught you to fill every gap with noise, long before every silence became something you needed to escape, rather than something you could simply rest inside. Think back, if you can, to a moment from childhood. Not a specific memory necessarily, just the general feeling of falling asleep as a child, before you carried mortgages or arguments or regrets, before your mind had learned to fill every quiet moment with worry. That stillness wasn't something you worked for back then. It was simply there, waiting underneath you, the way a floor waits beneath a house, unnoticed, precisely because it never needed to announce itself. That stillness didn't disappear as you grew older. It was never taken from you. It was only buried, slowly, gradually, one worry at a time, one sleepless night at a time, one habit of filling silence with noise at a time, until you forgot it was still there, until you began to believe that peace was something you'd have to search for, build, or earn from scratch, rather than something you'd simply have to uncover again, the way you'd brush dust off something that had been sitting quietly in a drawer the whole time, untouched but never gone. Underneath the racing thoughts, underneath the worry, underneath the exhaustion that keeps you staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., there has always been a stillness, patient, unmoved, waiting the way the sky waits behind passing clouds. Think about that image carefully. When storm clouds roll across the sky, thick and dark, blocking out the sun entirely, does the sky itself change? Does the blue disappear, destroyed, replaced permanently by grey? Or is the sky still there, exactly the same as it always was, simply hidden for a while, behind clouds that are, by their very nature, temporary? The clouds change, the sky doesn't. The clouds arrive from somewhere, drift across for a while, and eventually move on, dissolving as quietly as they formed. But the sky was never affected by any of it. It didn't have to do anything to remain the sky. It didn't have to fight the clouds or chase them away. It simply remained exactly what it was, underneath everything, the entire time, whether anyone below happened to notice it or not. You are not the storm of thoughts passing through your mind tonight. You are not the worry about tomorrow, or the memory of yesterday, or the racing list of everything you still need to do. Those are the clouds, real, sometimes heavy, sometimes dark, but always temporary, always passing, never permanent, no matter how convincing they feel in the moment. You are the space they're passing through. You are the sky that was there before the clouds arrived, and will be there long after they've drifted on. And that space, that sky, that quiet, undisturbed openness, it was never disturbed, not once, not even tonight, not even during the loudest, most exhausting, most sleepless night you've ever had. This is not something you need to achieve. You don't need to become the sky. You already are, and always have been, whether or not you ever noticed the clouds passing across you. Every technique this teaching has offered, noticing without reacting, setting down what you're carrying, letting silence exist without filling it, no longer treating your thoughts as an enemy. All of it points toward this one simple remembering: the peace was never missing. It was only ever waiting, patiently, underneath everything, for you to stop searching so hard for something that was here the entire time. And here is the thing no one tells you. You don't fall asleep by winning the battle against your thoughts. You fall asleep the moment you stop believing there was ever a battle to win. The moment you realize the mind was never broken, only busy. And busyness is not a flaw, it's just weather. Let it pass. You were the sky the entire time. So if you came here tonight, still carrying the question from the very beginning, what if peace was never lost, only buried? Maybe now it feels a little less like a question, and a little more like something you can feel settling in your chest right now. Not because anything outside of you changed, but because you stopped fighting the wind through the open window and let it simply move through, the way it always wanted to. If this brought you even a little closer to rest tonight, let this channel be the quiet place you return to whenever your mind gets loud again.